Ewan came with it with such a great degree of enthusiasm.
Like a kid in a candy. I've been waiting for this for weeks. I've been thinking, every morning I say, I wonder if it's today I'll get to choose.
We'd never seen anybody with the same commitment that he gave. So we were thrilled.
Ewan McGregor, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
First criteria for casting Obi-Wan Kenobi was somebody who was complementary to Alec Guinness, but not just sort of copy it, but create an addition to that character.
Where are you going, Master? For a drink?
Because he is younger, he's in a completely different place, and he's a very active Jedi, so I needed somebody very physical, somebody who was a fantastic actor.
No.
And who could pick up the mannerisms and the essence of the Alec Guinness performance.
So this was like a dream come true to him, to see the final, circle of his early life come to grips with playing this great part.
It's great, isn't it? God, I used to fantasize about things like this as a kid.
Hey, so not to sound hyperbolic, but Obi-Wan Kenobi is and always will be my favorite fictional character in anything ever. I grew up on the prequels, the original trilogy, and the Clone Wars TV series, and I've read every book and comic under the sun that I could get my grubby little paws on over the years that expand on the story of my favorite character. I love Obi-Wan Kenobi. And if you've kept up with any of my Star Wars reviews in the past, year, then you know that I haven't exactly been happy with, any of it. I hated the Book of Boba Fett, I was bored and disappointed by The Bad Batch, Visions made me actively upset on multiple occasions. As far as on-screen media goes, I don't think I've enjoyed anything from Star Wars since The Mandalorian Season 2, and even then, I've gone back and started to notice some serious writing flaws in what I initially perceived to be a pretty good season of television. But take my love for Obi-Wan and my disdain for the current bukkake of Star Wars drivel, and you have a drink that doesn't exactly mix well. The Book of Boba Fett has served as a sobering reminder that just because the main character is one of my favorites in the whole franchise doesn't mean it's immune to bad writing. And after the absolute dumpster fire that was that show, my faith in the Obi-Wan series being any good has sufficiently plummeted. And I suppose this is the part where you expect me to say that all changed with the recent dropping of the Kenobi trailer, but no. Don't get me wrong, it's a really solid trailer, and at this point I've probably watched it upwards of 20 times. They knew what they were doing with their choice of music. Nostalgia baiting at its finest, sure, but damn it if I don't get a little teary-eyed hearing Duel of the Fates and Battle of the Heroes swell up. There's just some kind of primal part of me that can't help it. I do have a few issues from the trailer that I'll talk more about in a bit, but yeah, I definitely want to come out and say that I think this was a pretty good one. And I should say it's about time, because as far as marketing goes, Lucasfilm has been seriously dropping the ball on this show. It comes out in just about 2 months, and we're only just now getting a teaser? This is so low levels of bad marketing. But anyway, I also want to make it clear that just because it was a good trailer does not mean it's going to be a good show. The Bad Batch, The Rise of Skywalker, and The Last Jedi all had pretty good trailers, and we all know how that turned out in the end. So although I liked it, that doesn't really change my initial opinion coming out of Book of Boba, which is that the show might be bad. Of course it could just as easily be good, only time will tell, but for now,
I am cautiously optimistic.
But in honor of this trailer finally debuting, I figured it was time to make this video. It's something I wanted to put out before the show dropped, just to kind of sort out what all we know and what we should be expecting going into the show, and I want to talk about what I feel needs to happen, as well as what absolutely shouldn't happen if this series has any hopes of being good. And after this show is finally finished and I do my review for it, I can look back at this video as a reference. And I don't really have a particularly organized way I want to discuss this, but I guess the first and potentially most important point I need to make is the elephant in the room. Darth Vader. He didn't actually appear in the trailer aside from his breathing at the end, which I really don't think counts. And I was surprised by this, because we already know for a fact that he'll be in the show and that Hayden Christensen has reprised his role. I assume he's going to be doing the Vader scenes, but I should also mention that his return implies, at least to me, that we're going to be getting plenty of flashbacks of Anakin and Obi-Wan during or even before the Clone Wars, which I'm absolutely here for. If they went to all this trouble to bring back Hayden just to have him sit in a chamber, unmask, and stare hauntingly into space, then I think that would be a huge wasted opportunity. Anyway, we know Vader will be in the show, and either they're waiting to show him in the final trailer, or they're saving him for the actual show, which I would prefer. But either way, I haven't exactly had my hopes very high about his handling in the series, and the trailer hasn't really done anything to absolve my concerns. It's been described as the rematch of the century, which all but outright says that Obi-Wan and Vader will fight in this show, and there's official concept art to support this. Now, I'm definitely one of the many people who are saying that they don't want to see them reunite in any way between episodes 3 and 4. before. And the argument I most often hear from the people who are for this happening is that there's no actual canonical thing hindering this from happening, which is true. It's sort of the same situation as the Obi-Wan Grievous fight in Revenge of the Sith, which I mentioned in my Dave Filoni video. The way Grievous talks in this scene implies that he and Obi-Wan have never fought before, and yet in the Clone Wars we see it happen all the time.
I've been trained in your Jedi arts by Count Dooku.
The reasonable explanation is that while Grievous said these things to Kenobi during their fight, he doesn't outright say, "This is the first time I've encountered you ever, General Kenobi." Oh, fuck. And so fans are able to just roll their eyes and accept it. It's the same exact case here. The dialogue between Obi-Wan and Vader in A New Hope definitely implies that Mustafar was the last time they saw each other, but it's never explicitly stated, so they could easily retcon it to where they meet at some point between the two films.
The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
I sense something, a presence I've not felt since...
But the people who make this argument are kind of missing the point of what we're actually saying, I think. It isn't that they can't have fought each other during this time period, it's just that that absolutely fundamentally shouldn't happen from a narrative standpoint. I just feel it cheapens their reunion in A New Hope if they encounter each other here. I think the emotional weight in their final duel together is enhanced by the fact that the last time they saw each other was the day that both of their lives were destroyed forever. When their friendship, their brotherhood that had been crafted over years of hardship and war was completely shattered. And now all these years later, these old wounds feel so fresh even still. Almost as if no time has passed at all. But whatever, I'm just a whiny fanboy with a microphone who doesn't understand Star Wars, I guess. No matter what, they're gonna do it, so if it absolutely has to happen, then I just hope we get two things out of it. One, Obi-Wan needs to fake his death. Vader needs to believe beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt that his former master is dead, otherwise there's not a single thing in the galaxy that would stop him from chasing Obi-Wan to the ends of the universe. And of course, it goes without saying that he also cannot, under any circumstances, learn that Kenobi is or ever was on Tatooine. In the trailers, it looks like the Inquisitors will be interrogating citizens of Tatooine, but to me it looks like they're there for an entirely separate reason, maybe something that has to do with Luke, I don't know. And maybe that's even why Obi-Wan has to leave Tatooine in order to lead them away so that they don't discover Luke. I'll talk more about this concept a bit later in the video though. But if Vader learns that Obi-Wan was ever hiding out on Tatooine, then it doesn't matter if he's presumed dead. Vader would still go there personally to investigate things. It's obviously too much of a coincidence that Kenobi would choose Anakin's own home planet to hide out on. If this were to ever happen and Luke wasn't eventually discovered by Vader, I'd have some serious problems. Plus, even if he faked his death, Obi-Wan definitely wouldn't take any chances of discovery. He would take Luke away from the Lars, Owen and Beru's protests be damned, and find somewhere else to hide just to stay on the safe side. The second thing that I'd want to happen if Obi-Wan and Vader have to meet is have Kenobi try just one more time to bring him back over to the light side. I've heard some people argue in favor of their reunion simply on the basis of this line.
I know there is good in you. The Emperor hasn't driven it from you fully.
Obi-Wan once thought as you do.
The argument goes that this line implies Obi-Wan believed there was still good in Vader, but during their duel on Mustafar, Obi-Wan doesn't really say anything to imply he thought that. Instead, he lectures Anakin on his failures and leaves him for dead. So I think if they have to make Obi-Wan fight Vader in this show, then the least they could do is add some weight to that concept. I doubt anything they do will ever make me accept it happening, but if they play it exactly like I've just laid out, then I might at least be able to appreciate the effort. Another thing I want to address, as I kind of talked about a minute ago, is the nature of how exactly Obi-Wan leaves Tatooine. It's kind of a risky move having this at all, because I know a lot of people were initially against the idea of this happening. Some people believe that he needs to stay on Tatooine for the entirety of the time between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, and while I'm definitely not of that mind, I do still think that this needs to be handled very carefully. For one thing, as I kind of touched on earlier, there's only one reason that could possibly be important enough for him to leave behind the planet which houses the singular hope for the entire galaxy. If he leaves Tatooine, it has to be because of Luke. There's a story in the EU that I really love from the Last of the Jedi book series, which I won't spoil too much for those of you who might want to read for yourselves, but what essentially happens is Obi-Wan finds out there's an Inquisitor who's looking into the events that went down on Polis Massa, the asteroid colony on which Luke and Leia were born. He's forced to leave the planet and stop the Inquisitor from uncovering the truth, and goes on a pretty fun mission involving lightsaber duels and even an encounter with Boba Fett. It's all really good stuff. Thankfully, he never squares off against Vader, which I'm glad for, and I'm not saying that it has to to go down exactly like this for the show to work, although from what we've seen in the trailers, it kinda looks that way, but along the same lines at least. If Obi-Wan leaves Tatooine, it has to be done in order to protect Luke. Maybe, like I mentioned, the Inquisitors are on Tatooine looking for some kind of Jedi in hiding, and Obi-Wan has to use himself as bait in order to lure them away from Luke. Of course, if they do chase him off-world, they would need to never learn who he really is, because again, that would lead Vader straight to Luke, so I am curious to see how they make sure all of this pans out. And the final thing I want to talk about is something that goes beyond just Kenobi. This is actually something that I've been holding in for a while now, because it's a constant for all of these live-action shows under Disney. I've meant to say something in both my Mando Season 2 video and my Boba Fett review, and I decided against it both times because I figured it wasn't even worth talking about. But then this trailer came out and it kind of blew up the conversation around the show. See, these live-action shows have, for the most part, not done a very good job with adapting the aliens from the original 6 movies. By now we've gotten Tuskens, Gamorreans, whatever the fuck Max Rebo species is, and a whole bunch of others that just look bad. I first noticed with the Tuskens in Mando Season 1, they literally look like they're wearing Party City costumes. But the latest example of this problem is, of course, the design of the Grand Inquisitor, and to a much smaller extent the Fifth Brother, who both first appeared in Star Wars Rebels and don't look anything like they do in that show. Look at this. What the fuck is this? Now, people like to argue that it's just a bad translation between animation and live action, and if that's all it was, I really wouldn't mind all that much. I mean, we definitely have much more egregious examples of that in other shows that I really like. But that's not even true here. The Grand Inquisitor is supposed to be a Powin, and we've seen what they're supposed to look like in live action. Tell me honestly, do these two look similar in any way? I do hope that Lucasfilm hears the complaints of the fans and does whatever CGI work necessary to fix it, but I know they won't. This, unfortunately, is not a Sonic movie situation. If I had a nickel for every time Lucasfilm blatantly ignored the wants of the fandom, even though listening to them would earn them a shit ton of money, I'd have enough money to buy Star Wars out from under them and start producing good stories. But if I'm being honest, what I really want to talk about here is less about the awful effects. Again, this is something that I'm used to, and if the show is really good, I won't even harp on this too much. I mean, I might a little bit, it looks pretty bad. But no, what I want to actually talk about here is regarding the discussion I've seen about the problem. It's time we ripped the band-aid off and stopped acting like there isn't a major epidemic in this fandom regarding toxic positivity. Yes, you heard me right, toxic positivity. Ever since The Last Jedi came out, the term toxic fan has become something of a buzzword in the Star Wars fan base, and it's usually aimed at people speaking negatively about a thing that they don't like. Usually it's applied to situations where no actual malice is being spread, which is why I have an inherent problem with the term being used, but it's also worked to create another, possibly worse thing. In an effort to combat toxic negativity, it seems like a lot of people have become overly positive about anything and everything produced under the Disney Star Wars umbrella. It doesn't matter what they put out, they think they need to praise it endlessly, and even when there's something to genuinely complain about, you're told you're toxic and that you're being ungrateful and nitpicking. Now, I fucking hate the term nitpicking because it's yet another buzzword that's been applied to so many situations of valid criticisms being brought up. Not every critique of a film or TV show has to be some major plot contrivance. Sometimes the little things really start to add up. But if someone doesn't agree with your argument, they can easily dismiss it by just saying you're nitpicking. It's such a straw man. And now, in the case of the Grand Inquisitor, fans like me, who again really liked the trailer, are being called ungrateful because we choose to make mention of a single aspect that we don't like. Honestly, when I saw the trailer, I remember seeing the Grand Inquisitor going, ooh, he looks bad, and then moving on with my life. If this topic hadn't been talked about as much as it has been, I wouldn't really be thinking about it all that much. My point is, there's such a thing as constructive criticism, and the second we start calling people toxic simply for doing just that, I'm gonna start having problems. I don't care if it's about something as bad as The Rise of Skywalker or as good as The Empire Strikes Back. If you have something genuinely constructive to say that is a critique of that thing, no matter how small, you should be able to say it without being called ungrateful, and I'm getting pretty tired of having to make this point, because it should be really obvious. I've been getting a lot of flack from my Dave Filoni video because I dared criticize the almighty Dave, and I'm here to set the record straight. I already said in that video that Filoni is a personal hero of mine. If it weren't for the Clone Wars, I might not be half the fan of Star Wars I am now. And I really do believe that the stories he managed to tell in that series were amazing and made the whole of the Star Wars canon better. But that shouldn't mean he's without flaws. law. He's not some divine entity who can do no wrong, and when people begin to treat him that way, it treads dangerously close to sounding like a cult. If you're unwilling to accept constructive criticism of a thing you enjoy, then you need to first of all grow the fuck up, and second, you need to reassess how important these stories are to you. Because I love Star Wars a lot, but I still have a grasp on reality, unlike a lot of the Filoni cultists I've dealt with for the past month. Anyway, long rant aside, that concludes my final point. Whether you agree or disagree that the Inquisitors look bad, just accept that some people don't like it, and that's totally fine. Don't ever lose sleep over someone else's opinion. If you enjoy that thing, that's all that should matter to you. But the Kenobi trailer was pretty good, guys, I won't lie. I still have my reservations, and the only way to know for certain whether or not it will be good will be just to watch it, so I'll end the video here. Let me know what you thought of the trailer and if you're excited for the show. I know one thing for certain, I cannot wait to see my favorite character once again. And that's all I've got for you this time, so as always, thanks for watching.